Hi, my name is Jeremy. I'm sitting here in the Guildhall Museum in Rochester, which at the moment is full of objects and empty of people. So while you're out there, until you can come and see us again, we thought we'd make a few videos to keep in touch. And these videos are especially for you if you're of the age where normally you'd be going to school, maybe here in Medway. This video is all about the Anglo-Saxons, and we've got some rules. I'm supposed to do this inside 10 minutes. I've got to tell you 3 things, and I'm allowed to use 3 objects to help me explain those 3 things. And if I can, I'm allowed to get in an extra object at the end just because I really, really like it. Okay. Thing is, with this one, I am going to break those rules. And if you want to find out what is so incredible that it's going to make me break those rules, then you're going to have to watch to the end of the video. Okay. Anglo-Saxons. First thing I want to tell you about the Anglo-Saxons is this is all about dead people. Yeah, well, of course it's about dead people. They came here 1,500 years ago. When I say dead people, I mean it's actually about the dead people and where they hang out in the ground. It's about graves. Because you see, the thing is, if you look at a map of Britain and you find out where Kent is, what makes Kent so interesting is Kent is not just on the edge, it's right in a corner. And it's very near the rest of the world. So when the Anglo-Saxons, who were a group of people of different types from northern Germany and southern Denmark, when they first came to Britain, Kent was just about the first place they came to because it was the nearest. And they lived here, and they died here, and were buried here. And the thing is, when they were buried, when their bodies were put in the ground, with them, they took some of their possessions. So when we find out about these first Anglo-Saxons that came to Kent, we do it by looking at their favourite things. Now that affects the kind of history we have, because the way you learn history changes the kind of history you learn. So when we look at this thing, this spearhead, which has come out the grave of an Anglo-Saxon man, it kind of brings us really close to him. Sort of. Imagine if the only way somebody could find out about you was by looking at 1 or 2 of your favourite things. What would that tell them about you? What wouldn't it tell them about you? So the first thing to remember about our Anglo-Saxons when they come to Kent is we find out about them mainly from their graves. Second thing, there's a reason why these objects, why this archaeology is so important. Because you see, when these Anglo-Saxons first came here to Kent, they didn't know how to write. They had no interest, really, in writing, which was very different from the Roman British who had been in charge of Kent before them. Luckily, the things that they made that were left in the ground with their bodies were very, very different from the things that the Roman British made. So when we look at them now, when people found them in the great age of exploring Anglo-Saxon archaeology in the past, it helped them to spot where the Anglo-Saxons went. Because you see, nowadays, we can do really clever things with skeletons. we are able to find out all sorts of things about a person by looking at their bones. But when these things were found, mainly one skeleton looked pretty much like another one. British skeleton, Roman skeleton, Anglo-Saxon skeleton. So when you find this next to a skeleton, which is definitely an Anglo-Saxon bronze disc brooch, suddenly we start to learn about that person. That pattern is most definitely from an Anglo-Saxon culture. They love that twisty, turny, snake-like pattern you've got there. So with our Anglo-Saxons, we get their objects from their graves, and the objects are really important because the only writing we have about them is either the things that they wrote down later on about what they thought their own history was like, or what other people wrote about them. It's the objects that get us into their world. Last thing. The last thing is what makes the Anglo-Saxons so interesting, but it's also what makes them difficult to talk about. And that thing is change. Talking about change in the past is quite hard. It's quite hard to understand. You see, when the Romans came to Britain, they already knew what they were about. They knew what they were going to do. They had a system for taking over Britain. It's the same with the Normans, William the Conqueror. The Anglo-Saxons are different because they grow and change and make a new place. They make England. And I think this is a really good example of how they are changing. I started off by showing you a weapon, because it seems quite likely that one of the reasons the Anglo-Saxons first came to Britain is they were asked to come. They were invited to work as soldiers, but they liked it, and they stayed. And they made things. This was found in Rochester, but it wasn't found on its own. It was found with a whole set of others. All that's important about it is it has to have a hole in the middle, and it's got to be really heavy, because this is for making something. This is an Anglo-Saxon loom weight. A loom is a big frame for making woolen cloth on. So when you get your sheep and you shear the fleece off and you turn the fleece into thread, you weave the threads together on a loom. So you make a crisscross pattern with all those threads. And to do that, what you need to do is the threads that go up and down, you've got to stretch them tight. And you do that by tying weights onto the bottom. And I think this is a great example of how our Anglo-Saxons are moving from fighters, conquerors, invaders, to settlers. And they're doing it right here in Rochester. About 10 minutes. So here's the first rule I'm going to break. I want to do more than 10 minutes. But instead of making this video really, really long, I'm going to do another one. So if you want to find out about what the big rule is that I'm breaking, you need to watch Anglo-Saxons Part 2. I'll see you there.